A lot of noise. Who is that in the background? Sounds like a TV or something.
No. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Good. No, I'm good here. That's good.
I should be good here as well. At least it's quiet to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm good here. That's good.
I should be good here as well. At least.
Oh, it was me who had like YouTube in the background.
Ah.
You're getting ready to post.
But it sort of played in another browser field here. So let's see here. So hello, everybody. We will be starting. Let's start 2 minutes past the hour mark. So we have to let people connect. So I was a bit interesting, Shigeru. You were saying before we went live that you have been working, or you started working at Oracle in, was it 97?
97, 98, yeah.
Okay. And when did you leave Oracle?
2015.
Okay. Why did you leave?
Why did I leave? So I was running sales in Oracle, and I was running the tech business, and then the question was whether I continue doing that or do something on my own. And clearly, after after so many years of negotiations and other things, I realized that there are things that customers have challenges with, and maybe I could actually build a business out of Oracle licensing. So, and also not only Oracle licensing, licensing of all other products. So we do other things too, but Oracle licensing is what I think I'm most passionate about. And so that's what, and I think it's been a good going for the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I was at Oracle from 2006 to 2000. I think it was the same time actually I left.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started Oracle, it was almost like the phone was ringing because companies wanted Oracle in the new solutions.
Right.
But the last few years, it felt like Oracle was simply milking more money out of customers without adding more value. It was, incorrectly licensing, not because they needed those licenses, but simply because they misunderstood it, or there's some errors in the contracts. And that, it's quite. Oracle has gone from a vendor which was probably on the top of everyone's list to, it seems like, on the bottom of many companies' lists.
That's actually very true. I don't know. Paul has been with, and I've seen what Paul has been doing. He's been working on Oracle technologies since, I think, the mid-1990s. So if you look at the mid-1990s to early 2000s, Oracle was something that people wanted to go with. But after that, things have changed. So absolutely. And then after that, I think Oracle sales teams have changed their character. That is also the other thing. It's not only the technical piece, it's also the sales team's character that has changed. That's been unfortunate.
Well, so we're going to talk a little bit about this today, Paul, but license audits from Oracle, how did you view them, 6 years ago compared to what Oracle is doing today? How have they changed?
It's a good question. Specifically around the projects I was working on about 6 years ago, they all happened to be very, very large enterprises, large telcos, large banks. And some of those were many, many months in the running. And it was obviously arduous, both from an Oracle audit point of view and also from defending that audit point of view, and also from the auditees' point of view as well. So it was large and complex, took a very long time, and actually the results for Oracle were pretty poor. I'd say these days, they don't want to do things like that. It's too long to get a result. They want to do shorter, sharper, get in small project, small customers probably, or small medium customers, find something and turn that into a result rather than getting a full view of compliancy across the entire process that a customer may have. But I think they're looking for quick wins, probably unsurprisingly.
Okay, I think it was a bit of a hitch up on the video there, but thank you for that. I think let's start now. Let's start with an introduction. So I can just begin. I'm Frederick Philipson. I am working at Readers Compliance, co-founder, and helping companies with Oracle licensing. And maybe we can start with Monica. Words about you. It's your first time with us, so.
Yes, my name is Monika Harasimiuk, and also I'm glad to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm the license manager responsible for Oracle at Nokia, where I'm working still since February 2015, so in fact 6 years already. And also I'm responsible, by the way, for a few more vendors, not only Oracle, but Oracle is my favorite one. And also since I joined Nokia in 2015, I just had to learn by myself all the Oracle licensing topics from scratch, and maybe this is a bit interesting also from this perspective that I'm the license manager who is at the moment in charge of Oracle as a vendor entirely for the entire Nokia. And I can tell you that my experience with Oracle started at Nokia 5 years ago in 2016, when I had to actually I was just given this opportunity by my managers, and I had to learn by myself almost everything. And also I would like to thank Frederick, by the way, because I also relied a lot of his knowledge and all these materials that he shared in the meanwhile with me. Also, they are also published so far, but yes, so this is my experience with Oracle, and I'm the license manager for this time being.
Okay. Well,
still, and I do this Oracle licensing work for the entire company. Okay. Mainly, I'm specialized in IT, but also there are some other topics that I am taking care of.
Okay, welcome. And maybe Morten, introduction.
All right, so my name is Morten Andersen. I'm co-founder of Readers Compliance, and well, my background is working with Oracle for about 8 years before I went on and went into licensing consultancy and ended up starting Readers Compliance.
Okay, I think we lost Monica, so hopefully she reconnects. And Sheshagiri, can you say a few words about you?
Yep, thank you. So, so my background too is from Oracle. So I was with Oracle for close to about 16 odd years, basically in the sales side of life. But in fact, I had started the LMS in India way back in 2001, 2002, and was in sales. And 2015, I quit Oracle and have started this. And just to add to something that, and thanks, Frederick, for having me here. I mean, we work together in the same field, but something that Monica just said about your videos and other things. To be honest, that is what attracted me to start talking to you and wanting to work with you guys, because the way you put it out outside, I think actually has helped a lot of customers out there. I mean, I know a lot of my customers who are having your newsletters and also your videos. I think that's a good thing that you've done. I mean, this is something that somebody like me who started about 4 or 5 years ago should have done. It's a good thing. By the way, I have also written a book on Oracle known as Licensing Oracle. So that's available. I mean, it basically takes you through in one single place everything that you can. But yeah, Frederick.
Okay, well, thank you for that. There was actually so we don't know anything. We just put out content, and we live in our isolated COVID homes. But if someone told me that, but there was someone quoting you from a video on a customer call, I was like, what is that? So it's a bit strange how these things happen, and it's great. You're in India, Monica is in Poland. We have Paul in the UK, and it's incredible. the world has changed, that you can network globally with people. So, and I learned from you guys. So, Paul, who are you? If you can share some words.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me back again on this one. I appear to be having some slight technical difficulties with my camera today, so hopefully it stays together. I've been working with Oracle licensing since 2001. I'm originally from a sort of technical background. I'm a DBA by trade, so I know the products really well. And obviously I know how Oracle act towards their customers. And that's kind of what interested me in doing that full time. So about 2009, I then switched to an independent Oracle license consultancy called Raquel, who they were set up back in 2001 as well, coincidentally, and I was actually their first customer. So I kept an eye on those guys, and I thought, time to get out of the DBA business, or DBA and licensing business, and move purely into licensing. So yeah, I continue to help people with all aspects of Oracle licensing. Just building on what Seshagiri was saying there, I was creating videos about Oracle licensing about 9 years ago. I think we were a bit too early with them, and also I don't like doing videos, as you well know, Frederick.
But I saw those videos before I sort of met you, and it felt like, hey, this guy has been, with a gun pointed to him. He doesn't like it or something. So it was...
Yeah, I don't like cameras.
Well, you seem a lot more relaxed to be on this video. Let's start by maybe Morten can start with this. If someone, we're going to talk about anyone wants to start working with Oracle licensing, where would you recommend that? How do you get into this? How do anyone become like an Oracle license management professional, Morten? Can you give some short tips for the viewers?
Well, I can tell you how I started and sort of draw a conclusion from there, with us basically starting redress compliance. So I got into Oracle licenses through working with the vendor, and I got a very basic introduction. It was not a very good introduction. I thought I knew everything about, I had to know about licensing. But as you grow in your field, you realize that there's so much about Oracle licensing. It's virtually impossible to know everything. So then you go out and you research, and you find out, especially on Oracle licensing, just a few years back, it was really, really difficult to find any good information. And that's basically what we ended up doing at Redress Compliance. We started sharing information because we thought there wasn't that much out there. So that's where you need to start. You need to start with the basics. And so I would recommend anyone who's in that, who wants to learn about Oracle licensing, go and watch some videos and do the research. And then the next thing is to get into a Oracle licensing community, because you need someone to talk to this about these licensing topics one way or another.
Okay, thank you. And Seshagiri, if someone is completely new to Oracle licensing, where would you start practically? Where do you find?
So, I mean, I don't want to flatter you guys, but people, your site and your videos and your presentations are a good place to start. And the fact is, I also wrote this book of mine for license managers. So that's another thing, but that is one thing. But let me, maybe for those who are listening here, let me just give them a view of what needs to go into understanding Oracle licensing. See, Oracle licensing is complex, not just because of the fact that you buy a software and it becomes you overuse or anything of that kind. Oracle licensing is difficult because of three different aspects that go into making it extremely complex, and that is, one is the technical side of it, the other is the contractual side of it, and the third is the commercial. In fact, the commercial piece is the easiest piece. The technical and the contractual are two very tough things to understand. And the worst here is something else, and that is something that falls between the technical and contractual. So let me just give you an example, maybe if I have the time. See, you buy Oracle database. And you decide to use it, and I mean, it's defined as, if whether it's installed, whether it's running, whether it's installed and or running or whatever that kind. But then the challenge that comes up is in your contract, you will be told where to use it and how to use it. Now, so you got to marry these two together. Now, apart from this, the other issue is you got to also understand what are the things that are licensed along with the database. So it's so you have to go through a lot of different things to bring all these things together. So I think start understanding the technology, start understanding the contracts, and learn, as Morten said, the basics first.
Yeah, that sounds very much like how I try to train people in our courses. You cannot learn everything at once. You just have to, it's like building a pyramid. You have to learn small steps all the time. Don't expect to know the full picture after a course. So Monica, you started with Oracle licensing, right? So can you just try to shortly explain how did you gain the knowledge? Did you go to a training course, or how did you learn?
Yes, I do remember it was really a nightmare from the very beginning for me, but I was in this good situation that I was already a Microsoft expert, licensing expert. And I could also recommend for all those people who want to start to learn Oracle licensing, if they are familiar already with Microsoft SQL Server licensing, this is not the same. This is not even that much similar to each other, but it helps a bit to get this the first overview and to understand a bit what Oracle licensing is about. Microsoft SQL Server licensing is also very complex, and I was a licensing expert already when I started doing Oracle. Therefore, maybe it was a bit easier for me to understand. But still, these technicalities and all these interdependencies, which we can see within Oracle licensing, are really difficult and really hard to understand, even after a few years. When I spent all my working time on still learning Oracle, in fact. So I'm still learning. I attended a lot of trainings. I attended a lot of courses, and also I read really tons of materials and licensing white papers in order to learn Oracle licensing. So I cannot tell for this time being I'm an expert. Definitely I know more than 5 years ago when I started. But it's really a fascinating topic for me because it's so challenging that I really like it. And maybe it sounds a bit weird for many people who started this Oracle licensing, because I don't know what's the reason. In fact, I can tell you I really like it, and I'm really very deeply involved in this all software asset management for Oracle, even from the technical standpoint. What is really very interesting, considering the fact I never saw any Oracle server on my eyes. It's just something that I have to admit. So I don't have any technical background. I started in 20 years ago, 21 almost, in Microsoft Poland as a sales representative, and during these last 20 years in IT, I just ended up with Oracle. And this is what I can tell you as an advice, that if you want to start Oracle licensing, then well, the basics of the basics is the best, I guess, hint here. But if you have something, or if you heard anything about SQL Server licensing, it will help you a bit. But it's always a matter of trainings.
Okay, I have so in the introduction, you say that you do other vendors as well, but you said that Oracle was your favorite. Why is it your favorite?
Because it's the most difficult one and most challenging. And it's from these perspectives, I really find Oracle licensing very interesting, but also, well, I think it's a very personal approach here, right? So basically, I like personally to learn more and more and more, and I'm always very open to learn. And because of the fact that Oracle is still very challenging and requires a lot of additional time to be spent on this learning and trainings, then I can tell you the more time I spend, the more interesting it looks like. But it's also very challenging. So, maybe it's the matter of the fact that I would like to understand it entirely, and of course be on the same level as you guys are, because I can just say respect to all of you. But yes, so basically my personal and also professional goal is to be an expert. Therefore I know that I have to learn, and yes, so I would recommend definitely all the trainings that Frederick you are leading, and together with Morten. It's extremely helpful, I can really tell you, as a user, as an attendee of those trainings that I attended many of those.
I think so. It's you have a different perspective. So I've never worked as a license manager as well, but I think you can probably learn a lot by just working at one company. But I think at least for us, I think Morten, Shishigiri, and Paul, who disappeared, what you're going to learn is that when you're seeing other customers' contracts, then it's going to open up a new world where you see there's so many differences in how you can have database licensing can be in a completely different way. They don't have a process, a metric. You don't have a name user plus. They have their own license model. And I think if you have the chance, maybe you move to a different company or start a services provider, you're basically going to realize, wow, whatever I learned at my employer, I learned a lot, but I can also understand there's so many differences between companies. And Paul, I think everybody here sort of talked about the training and everything. Can you talk a little bit what you think and touch on the value of having a network?
Yeah, I think a few people have mentioned this in their answers, but there are no black and white answers to a lot of questions when it comes to Oracle licensing. Sometimes it's piecing together license manuals, sometimes technical implementation manuals, sometimes it comes down to experience. And I think the experience one is really hard to get without having a network, unless you know someone who's been through multiple audits before. If you're looking after Oracle as a licensee and you're up against an audit, how do you know how to deal with an Oracle audit? How do you know what behaviors they're going to have, how you should respond, what sort of things they're going to be looking for, what's okay to release, what's not okay to release to them? Without having access to someone who's been through that before, maybe just once or twice, you're flying blind. You're being led entirely by Oracle at that point. And so it's probably quite a lonely place without a network, I would imagine.
I think for me, it's Oracle have 1,000 products, right? You cannot be an expert in everything. And I think the great thing is to be able to ask people like you, like, okay, have you seen this before? Like I did this week, because I've never seen it before. So, and you said, Paul, I don't know either. You have to investigate. So, even if you worked 15, 16 years with Oracle licensing, 100%, you still don't know.
Yeah, you'll never get there.
So I'm Shishagiri. Maybe you can. There's a question here. If you would be offered a job, you would accept it because they pay you so much money to become like Monica, a license manager for a large company, and that they have a full stack of Oracle products. What would you do? What would be your priorities to get it, to get under control?
I think we are losing from time to time someone.
Okay, so a good question. How do you get Oracle under control? Oracle doesn't want to be under your control, right? So that's the first thing, right? But having said that, I think the most important thing, and if you start out as a license manager in a company, I think there are two things that people should do. That person should do. One is start collecting all the contracts of Oracle and keeping it in one place. I think that's something very important, especially historically, understand the different contracts that they have, because the usage obligations and everything changes with the contract. So I think first thing, they should keep everything in place, understand what their entitlements are. Now, I'm not even saying that understand how Oracle contracts and other things, just understand, get those things in place. Second is, get somebody who can do a due diligence on your estate and get you a license deployed position. I mean, call it OSW in one way or call it whatever you want to call it, but get a license deployed position and get them to look at your contracts and come out with a position, so that you have some baseline to start off with. So you need to know your estate. So once you know your estate, you also have the time to start learning about Oracle. If you already know a lot about Oracle, then even then, this is the best thing to do. So get that in place, do due diligence, get your contracts in place, and then start any engagement that you want to have with Oracle. In fact, don't engage with Oracle unless you do your own internal due diligence.
Okay, good tips. And
I would
Morten,
also add one more thing, if I can comment what Sheshagiri said, because of course everything is right what you said, and I fully agree. But also maybe it's worth to mention that you should collect all the contracts and read them carefully.
Oh yes, of course.
Because there are always different terms and conditions in the end of each of those contracts, and they can differ from each other. And this is I guess the crucial part, because you won't find these details in Google or somewhere. You can only find those terms, conditions, and licensing details in the contract itself. So each single contract is the source of information, right? Or source and the root cause of all this licensing information which you can gather. So this is my experience also. So I was really reading all this information. They are repeatable to some extent. So you don't have to, remember all these 100 or 200 lines or pages, but just the crucial information, what the license metrics are, what the differences are, what the minimums are, just to start from this point. As I recall, I also started from this point, and I can tell you it's really helpful to move forward.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe we can just go to you directly then for the follow-up, Monica. So because you've done this, right? You've done, become an Oracle license manager for a large company. So I'm just curious, did you make any let's say if you would have the chance to do it again?
My answer is yes. Not sure, Frederick.
But,
if you want to finish your question, yeah, but yes.
yeah. But it essentially, was there a mistake that you made that you would do it differently in how to learn and how to do the Oracle licensing part?
If I understood you correctly, you asked because you've been lost for a while, right? So your voice disappeared for a while to me. So I'm not sure if I understood you right. But did you ask me about some mistakes that I've done during my career at Nokia as a license manager for Oracle? Licensing or mistakes in terms of understanding of Oracle terms and conditions?
No. So my question is more about things you did when you started to learn Oracle licensing. Did you make any mistakes that sort of wasted your time, or would you do anything differently if you would do it again?
Yes, I think yes. I do remember I did I made some mistakes because of, I can also dig into details if it comes to the license metrics. So because commercial data is something that you can learn, read, and even repeat every day. But the second step is how to use it on your daily basis and at your work, right? How to apply this data to the technical part, which you have to compare to this commercial data. And I do remember I made this mistake for NUPs. 5 years back. So this NUP, named user plus license metric, and the calculation steps, how to estimate the license demand for NUPs, where to start from, comparing to the processor license metric. I remember it was really difficult to understand, because it was completely different approach than everything what I saw before in Microsoft licensing for SQL.
Correct.
It's completely different world. And I do remember, yes, I made such mistakes in the very beginning. Fortunately, I learned very quickly that I made those mistakes, and also had a chance to improve and to understand it much better. Therefore, now I really can tell you I really recognize them much better than I did 5 years ago.
It's interesting, because I would, if I would, let's say, would become a license manager for some other vendor, and I don't know anything, I think it could be easy to just look at, let's say, a SAM tool. I think that the SAM tool can tell me the truth.
No,
but I think,
absolutely not. No. And this is maybe a common mistake that many of people are making by thinking that they can fix everything by one click in a SAM tool. I also saw such an approach before I joined this current company where I'm working at the moment. This is absolutely incorrect. I can tell you, as the license manager and also software asset management consultant, which I was, who I was before I joined Nokia. This is really very risky to take such an approach, because you cannot see some details, some additional knowledge is really required, and this human being knowledge is, let me put it this way, more required than only looking at the SAM tool. SAM tool doesn't tell you any details that you want to gather, and definitely not NUPs, definitely not this kind of license metric. Of course, there are also some other traps related to software asset management tools, some tools, because not all of them are capable enough to gather these technical details, which are really crucial. So the data accuracy is very important. And if we talk about some tools, definitely we should really think twice or 3 times before we make this decision about the SAM tool. This is maybe another topic which can be touched in a while, but just, as a background. So definitely SAM tool doesn't help you much if you don't know what you should look for.
I think, what's your, Paul, thinking about, maybe it's a bit of outside of the question now, but if you would start as an IT asset manager, and let's say that they have you have Flexera, what would you, where would you start? What would be your sort of your short, high overview plan for the first few months?
A very good question. I wasn't quite expecting one so specific, I don't think. If I just walked into a company and they had Flexera already in place, and my job was to take Oracle into hand, as has been already mentioned, contracts first, put Flexera to one side. I wouldn't care what was in there. It would go back to basics. It would go back to paper-based. It would go back to looking at the contracts and, frankly, creating a spreadsheet with all the relevant contracts in there and getting a view of that. When it comes to actually measuring the usage, which is obviously a critical part, as we know, Flexera has major limitations. It's not going to give you a nice bar graph that shows you're compliant on it. You're not compliant with any accuracy, as has been mentioned. But it does have some capabilities. It can go and interrogate some stuff for you. So I would use it for the stuff it's good for, which is, accessing some databases and getting some information out. But with a large pinch of salt, I would use that as a sort of foundation set of usage information, and then use what other tools the company has to build on that. And by that, I mean deploying alternative accurate scripts and getting a grip of collecting information which can't be measured by scripts as well. So NUPs has been a good example there.
I think it's worth clarifying that SAM tools, they can do Oracle database in some capacity, but other products than that, Oracle middleware, Oracle applications, completely, I think we can say disregard the SAM tool at all for those products.
Yep.
Morten, so finally we're coming to you. How would you approach it, a new job as a license manager?
So I agree with the panel here. So first, of course, you sort of need to get an understanding of what is your actual situation, what's the compliance situation you are dealing with, and you need to get yourself educated about the company and the contracts and that. And then I think, and this is something we often talk to people about, is that you need to get a second opinion. You need to invite someone in who's external, who can show you the Oracle processes, the Oracle tool, and give you an expert opinion about what is actually happening in your current state. And the reason for that is that you will overlook something, and there will be dark spots in your analysis, in your processes, in the tools that you are using, the SAM tools, whatever it might be. So get that second opinion. I think that's very important. But of course, you need to have a good sense of the situation before you actually do that.
Yeah, I think at least from me, I would probably one of the first questions I would ask, like, have we been audited? Do we have an audit report lately? At least you would have like some sort of collective document from Oracle. And I sort of agree with you. The contracts. If you don't have the contracts, what's the latest support renewal? Check your finance department for that. I think there's often this fear, I think it's misunderstood. If you reach out to Oracle and ask for contracts, that you might be audited. No, when I was at Oracle, I never come across when a company said, can we have a copies of our licensing agreement? And at Oracle, there was never any discussion, let's audit them. It was never like that. But obviously, you can have a salesperson who's asking you questions about licensing, but that you can shoot down. With that, I sort of want to go to something that appeared on my LinkedIn feed today. Can everyone see this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've all seen it.
Yep.
But so essentially, they commented below in this thread saying that Snow Software have done a report here, and they've interviewed 4,000 IT executives. I think it was in what was it? In US, UK, Germany, and Australia. 250 in each region, they claim. And which vendors have audited your organization in the past 12 months? 60% say Microsoft. Well, you can see IBM 40%, 34% Oracle. Paul, what do you think about this?
They're very good at getting people and getting a very large sample size and getting people to actually fill in their questionnaire, I think. The numbers are very, very round, especially when you start multiplying out these percent across sample size that they have gone and questioned. It just doesn't look authentic to me. Maybe there was some good data behind. I doubt it, though. I really don't think the sample size could have been anything like that. And I say you multiply those out and you look at the 1,000 people who've been audited by these organizations. That's just not true. It's just not the case. So I don't know what they think they were playing at. I don't know whether they've been duped with the survey company they used or whether they've overinflated the numbers. But I think it's probably detrimental to their marketing team to put that out, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
I personally also think that these numbers, I cannot refer to any other vendor except of Microsoft, frankly speaking, because Microsoft looks very suspicious to me in these figures. I would say that it's exaggerated much, this 60%.
Yeah. Martin, what do you think?
Indeed.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, because I'm losing a video and voice from time to time.
Okay.
But yes, as I mentioned, it looks a bit irreliable to me, frankly speaking. At least this first line for Microsoft. Not sure about the other ones. I would also doubt. And by the way, regarding Microsoft, it might be because Microsoft doesn't audit the end customers by itself. So there is nothing like a Microsoft audit. There are always Microsoft partners who are doing that. This is not something that Microsoft is leading directly. And maybe some kind of software asset management activities which are done through partners are also perceived as.
I think Monica is having connection issues today.
So,
okay, Morten, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so
has been analyzed, yes, and considered.
Okay, Monica, I think you have some connection issues because you're sort of
yes, and I'm also facing some connection issues. I don't know why. It's a first time when I'm facing these issues with my voice and video connection. So sorry for that. I really don't know what's the reason.
No problem. Morten, sorry, can you continue, Morten? What is your...
Yeah, no, I agree. It seems exaggerated. The first thing, when I was sort of reading into the thread and saw the number, the first thing I was, and you pointed out, Frederick, very well, that they got to be very, very busy in these audit organizations. I know a lot of these they take a very long time to complete, so they must be very, very busy. And not only in Microsoft, but I for sure also in Oracle. So I think there's something wrong here.
Well, Shishagiri, so I made some calculations on this when they posted it was 4,000 people. And then they said that 34% have been audited by Oracle. So basically it was 1,350 people or companies that have been audited by Oracle. I don't think Oracle do 1,000 audits globally annually.
If that were the case, we would all be millionaires. Yeah. so that's not. So I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is. I don't know. There's clearly Snow has made some mistake here. Microsoft is nowhere. I mean, I think all of us are in the field, right? I mean, we speak to so many customers, and Microsoft, with the way they have changed their licensing models and their subscription stuff, they do not need to audit this much. So there is, I mean, on the SQL Server side, on the Windows Server a bit, but I don't think their partners are also going about doing that. So, I mean, on the Office side, they're out, they're not. IBM, yes, with Red Hat, there is an extent, but again, these numbers, I don't know. I mean, I think they will come up with a correction.
Yeah, it doesn't put Snow in a good light, I think, by putting this out here.
In fact, I wonder why. I wonder why Snow has put this out. I mean, surprising. It's not right.
I agree. So there's. Let me remove this one. Here we are going back. There's a question here from David. Flexera or Snow or what for Oracle? And yes, sound tool is not a guide. One has to understand what is not. Maybe, yeah, Paul, what would you choose here? Flexera or Snow?
Oh, do I have to choose one of those two?
Or what?
Or what, I think. It really depends what your goals are, I think. When I talk to people, different people have different things they want out of a SAM tool. So you've got to align whatever tool you look at with those business goals. Are you trying to capture your entitlement, in which case there's products which are good for that? Are you trying to measure usage and do discovery, in which case maybe you don't even need a tool, maybe you can exploit what you've already got in your estate, and that's kind of what we prefer to do. Why go and buy a tool when you've got something you could rework and then post-process and turn into something with far less cost and far less problems with dealing with a vendor who doesn't necessarily understand how to license these products properly. So it really depends what you want to get out of it, I think.
Yeah.
I have a question to Paul. Does it maybe depend on the company size? Because I've heard that Snow has some limitations if it comes to the number of servers or devices which can be analyzed in this particular tool. And I was never using Snow, by the way. We are using Flexera, by the way. But I've heard about these limitations for Snow. I'm not sure if this is 100% reliable, but I'm just mentioning because I also would like to know whether this is some kind of problem for Snow to capture companies above significant number of devices or servers.
I've never heard of a limitation on Snow, if I'm honest with you. But if I was forced to choose one of those two products, I would go for Flexera. I see it in use in more large enterprises. So it seems to be better in large enterprises, if I'm honest with you.
Frederick, do you mind me taking this question?
Sure.
Yeah, because I'll tell you why. Disclosure, we have a tool of our own. And I come from the Oracle side of life. So I started building the tool basically to do Oracle. Right. And to be honest, the challenges were not on the database side, the challenges were on the middleware side. So we actually have built something that's very good on that side. But be that as it may, I still, despite having my own tool that I sell to the people, I also tell my customers that do not depend only on the discovery that we do on. Get onto the machines if needed and understand what is there, because however, all the different types of queries that you need at the end of the day. And this is, I mean, I'm telling you, I have my own tool. We believe our tool is very good for Oracle and both the database and middleware, but having said that, I still believe that it is important to get onto the right queries and the right scripts to understand what is going on within each server. Yeah, the tools are very good for getting CPU information. The tools are very good for getting virtualization information. The tools are very good for getting hard partitioning and soft partitioning stuff. All that is very good in a tool. I mean, because that's simpler stuff. But getting to understand database, getting to understand WebLogic, forms, reports, or Web Center, it's very, very difficult. I mean, we have built at least 35, 40 adapters for different products of Oracle. I mean, how do you get to understand how Hyperion works? It's not a straightforward thing, right?
No.
So, I mean, you'll find Smart View in one and you will find a Web View in another. I mean, what do you do? So, these are things that, so yeah, as I think, as Monica has said, I think or whether it was Paul, I don't know, on the entitlement side, tools are very, very good. On the discovery side, go to the hardware, understand where the Oracle software is listening, and after that, start doing other things.
Yeah, I think let's. There's some good comments from Videsh Shigiri. I think there, for people who don't know, in the past month, there's been Oracle has opened up their verified tool program. So more SAM tools are being verified, and one of them is actually, if I can hide this one here, Zotero. And when I just read this here, it says here, the Zotero for Oracle product is verified by Oracle as an alternative to installing Oracle license management measurement tools. This means Oracle audit team will accept usage from Zotero for Oracle during an official audit, and you do not have to manually install. So first off, you don't install the Oracle scripts. So I don't know where that's coming from, and run them. But Morten, what do you think about this?
So about verified or certified Oracle tools in general, well, I think it's a little bit of a marketing gimmick, and people should really discount it. That's what it is. You can't really use it for that much. The only thing it will become, if you use it as a tool and you actually buy into this verified tool, is that it becomes something that you trust as a compliance, that it can give you an accurate compliance position, and it simply cannot do that. So from that perspective, I think it's blah blah.
If I may comment shortly, I think the key word here is this last sentence: run a separate set of scripts, except of these Certero scripts, right? So basically, maybe they mean here that the only scripts that you should run coming from Certero, and you don't have to use any other ones to compare to Certero scripts. Maybe this is my assumption. Also looks a bit interesting from this perspective. But comparing to Flexera, for example, also is good to very good, and I think the very good option is to compare to other data source and other SAM tools. So I would say also the same as Shishagiri said before, that only one tool is not sufficient. But I can tell you also we are using Flexera, but also we are using also other scripts, and all the time I'm comparing the data to each other. And only one tool is insufficient, and I wouldn't rely on only one.
That's a good comment, and I think so. Paul, we had some discussion about this, I remember, and essentially, I'm not talking about any specific tool here, but the tools are in two ways. Sometimes they say that you need a license, and sometimes they don't pick up the licensing. So it goes to both ways. So Paul, what is really the process for companies being verified by Oracle? Because I just think Oracle this is a faulty process for how are they becoming verified, because they don't have even the database correct.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking, isn't it? Really, and you're right. It's easy to find false positives and false negatives in these tools, which kind of makes a mockery of the whole verification side of things. Really, I have over the years been approached by many of these verified tool vendors, sort of obviously wanting us to peddle their products, which we would never do. But my understanding is that in effect, it's their measurement of the server side of things, the CPUs, the hard partitioning, etc., which is the bit which is really the thing that Oracle is scrutinizing. In a way, the database options stuff, I get the impression is kind of given to them on a plate, or they have to sort of show some logic that they can sort of work out from gathering these DBA views or data dictionary views that this option is in use, and then Oracle say, okay, and here's the bits you've missed, just go and embed those in and give us some of that output, and we'll process it. So the process obviously is not transparent. What people need to do to go through this and get this certification, and as was said at the top of the comment here, this process only covers database as well. So it's a real partial fix, and one which needs to be used with caution, I think.
But why, if this false positives here, why would you want to take the SAM tools false positives and give it to Oracle, and Oracle say you need to buy licenses? I don't understand.
Well, anyone who does that without really understanding that data and getting their, the DBAs and the experts involved to say, actually, that doesn't look genuine. It's very unfortunate when that happens, because quite often people do send that output, and then they get the sting later, and it's too late. The remediation or the chance to tidy things up has gone. The horse is bolted.
Shishagiri, have you come across any time where Oracle have said, okay, we can take your SAM tool because it's verified. We can take that data. You don't need to run the Oracle audit script. Have you come across any time when Oracle have accepted that?
So there was one customer who actually uses one. I won't name the tool because that would not be right. But there was one customer who uses one of these verified tools of Oracle, and they gave the. They were sent a LMS audit letter, a notice, and they came back and said that we are using this tool, so we are compliant. And they did not want to give the information to Oracle initially, but Oracle said, do give it, and these guys believed that it was okay, and so they actually ended up giving it. Now, the minute they gave it, what happened actually was, because of these false positives and false negatives that are there, Oracle actually said that we now need you to run our scripts, because they found that there were mistakes and there was non-compliance, which the customer actually believed that things might be okay. So actually, the tools gave them the data, but they were not able to interpret it correctly. They gave them to Oracle thinking things are okay, and Oracle came back and said, now you need to run our tools, our scripts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when they called us. That is a different matter, but that's where the challenge is.
Yeah. I sort of I agree on this, because it's Oracle can always ask you to run the scripts. Just because you buy a verified SAM tool is they're going to accept it. And actually, I have not come across any time where Oracle is accepting it. But obviously, every time we help companies with audits, we would never recommend anyone to take what's in your SAM tool and give it to Oracle. It would be, it's such a newbie mistake, I think, because as you say, Shishigiri, if they don't see anything, they say, please run the scripts, and then you have no time and you're caught. So I think we're running out of time, but just there's a question here I forgot to talk about, but maybe just briefly about this, and that is about ULAs. We see, I think everybody here sees more and more companies exiting ULAs, not renewing. And Shishigiri, what do you think is gonna come to replace it in the future? Do you have any thoughts about Oracle's future enterprise agreements?
So I think it's not about not renewing. It's more about not wanting to renew. So customers are now not wanting to renew. I mean, whether they're exiting or not exiting, I think it's still moot. We will have to see it in the next 6 months to a year. But as of today, customers want to exit, and that is, I think, the right thing to do. Because ULAs were great between 2005, 2006 when it started off, 2004 when it started off, to about 2012, 13. I think post that, the ULAs are not the greatest of things. So people are, what will replace it? Unless Oracle becomes big in the cloud, Oracle will be replaced. So there's nothing else to discuss there.
Yeah. Okay, Martin, what do you think?
Well, I think we're going to still see the ULA around, and primarily the reason why I think that is because whenever I see or engage with clients, I see them often being proposed by Oracle sales.
Yeah.
So that in itself will push a lot of ULAs, and Oracle has a massive market size, lots of customers that they can talk ULA to. So I think we're going to continue to see them, and I also think they are the right agreement for certain customers. So, but definitely we are trying to tell them all about where you can go wrong, and there are a lot of places where you can go wrong with the ULA. But it can also be a good agreement if you know how to manage it.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, if there is growth, there is no doubt that ULA is the right thing to go with.
Yeah, and maybe for companies with a huge estate and basically there's no way of controlling it. Paul, what's your view about ULAs?
I don't share Morton's optimism about seeing them still rolling out the door, I'm afraid, Morton. I think they are probably a thing of the past. We are going to see less and less of them. There are obviously niche circumstances where they're absolutely ideal. I think with people tightening their belts, wanting to reduce spend and OPEX spend, I think that puts the nail in the coffin largely for ULAs. I suspect we'll probably see, obviously, more attempts at saying cloud, whether that's cloud or customer. I don't think that's going to be a massive success. Or perhaps something slightly more like the old sort of support to cloud, sort of trading in of old support streams into cloud credits to try and incentivize people over those. But if I'm honest with you, I don't think there's going to be anything revolutionary coming from Oracle when it comes to enterprise agreements.
No, I actually think, if you look at the Oracle annual statement or revenue reports, 70% of their money is coming from maintenance renewals, where they have a 95% margin, and Oracle loves their maintenance renewals. And they are not going to let customers remove it and go to the cloud. They'd rather keep the maintenance contracts.
Well, I observed the quite opposite approach, that they would like the customers to go to the Oracle Cloud instead of software maintenance. But okay, maybe it should be analyzed case by case. Maybe you saw also something different. Maybe it depends on the country or region or customer size. Everything is matter, right? So
yeah, customer contract as well, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a question here. I thought like maybe it's good to hear some from Ross. Does anyone have a view on Oracle pool of funds declarations? I understand we're to declare every 6 months, but we're supposed to just remember this. LMS is all over us for annual declarations. Paul, I know you have some experience in pool of funds. What's the answer here?
Sadly, this is one that Oracle just to remember it. POFs are used in many different ways. Some people use them up really, really quickly, and therefore, that first 6-month declaration draws everything down. Other people use it and then realize it's a use it or lose it sort of contract, and then just go and claim the whole thing. I think it's worth saying a calendar reminder for every 6 months once the contract is agreed. And this is another case where people need to read the contract at the time it's signed and get a process in place to make sure that's managed properly. And it needs to be sent through to Oracle. That is part of the contractual obligation.
Yeah. My experience is that Oracle is often not really managing the declarations, because I've come across, so anyone who don't know, pool of funds is where you don't know what products you want from Oracle. You just pay them X amount of millions of pounds or euros or dollars. Then you can you have a credit with Oracle, and you have a price list with a high discount, so you can sort of take out licenses, and then you're supposed to report that to Oracle, every 6 months. But I think Oracle usually don't want to do it because there's no money in it to this process.
They don't care.
Yeah, they only care at the end, or where the money is, or when it's running out.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a question here. I don't know if anyone, and here it comes to where 15 years or do we have 100 years of Oracle experience here? So here's a question about Primavera. I don't know that question. Do anyone else know? Thank you for this useful panel. I have a question about Primavera. Can I use that with EPPM license?
No, the answer is no.
No. Enter timesheet for another person having no license. Oh, okay. No, you cannot. No.
The answer is the first one is no.
Yeah.
The first one answer is no. With regard to batching, again, it would be a third-party access kind of a situation.
Yeah.
In this case, in a database case, it's a different thing. But EPM, it's this.
It depends on the contract, though, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Staying true to what we've said throughout this. Look at your metric.
Yeah. So there's what's the most common compliance issue with Primavera that we've seen? I think there's something with indirect usage that, at least what I heard from others, is that Oracle seems to be doing sort of sales informal audits on this usage.
So I have had just one recently, And the reason I think they seem to be doing it is they want people to move to Primavera on the cloud. So that is what they're trying to push, and on the cloud, Primavera is extremely good. I mean, there's no doubt about it. In fact, the industry solutions on the cloud from Oracle are good. I mean, I don't want to. So I think that's what they're trying to do. And third-party access is one of the largest single pieces of non-compliance that come in.
Biggest one I see on Primavera is just quantity, just people deploying it.
Oh yeah.
It's a classic one for that. It's easy to deploy to a lot of people.
And easy to deploy. The second thing is, I mean, you have SAP on the side where Primavera is there. So, you really don't know who is using what. So it's a funny situation.
Thank you for that. And there's a question here. Maybe this is good for you, Shishagiri. You've been at Oracle Sales. How to approach, what kind of strategy should I use negotiating a new contract with Oracle? Well, yeah, you can answer this. It's they don't care about unused licenses.
It doesn't matter to Oracle.
No.
I mean, with unused licenses, actually doesn't matter to Oracle at all. I mean, once you're paid, you're paid. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, what kind of
As I understand, Tom asks whether it's possible to replace existing unused licenses with some certain amount of Oracle Java licenses, right? So if this is the point, then I also agree with Shishagiri that it's not possible.
No, you need to deal. Basically, if you're going to Java, you're going to be negotiating.
My two-penny advice here is, if you are looking at wanting to get Java, do a due diligence immediately before thinking about even talking to Oracle. It can mean millions of dollars of non-compliance. And before you do anything, Java, just go and check what is the situation.
Yes, good advice. And I think with that, we thank everybody for watching today, and thank you for all of you who are attending on this panel. And I think Java might be a topic for a future.
Someday we should. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.